Hello, everybody, and welcome. It's lovely to have you here. Thank you for joining if you are joining live. And if you are watching this on replay, then I hope you are going to enjoy what you're seeing and you're able to, of course, rewind and watch parts that particularly take your fancy. So today we're going to explore how educators can inspire active learning through Gemini, and we're mostly going to be focusing on Gemini Canvas. As educators, we know the huge importance of active learning. We know that if students are actively involved in their learning and they are doing rather than hearing, then there is more likelihood for them to remember more of what they are learning. We also know through brain research that greater connections can be made with active learning. So that's connections to prior learning, connections to prior experience. And also, if students are being active rather than passive in their learning, then they're more likely to receive immediate feedback. And that way, some misconceptions and errors can be ironed out straight away. And we also know that when students are active in their learning, they're moving beyond those lower order thinking skills like rote memory, rote memorization, and they're moving into the higher order skills of analyzing and evaluating and creating. And finally, as educators, we know and we see that when students are actively involved in their learning, they're more engaged and they have more ownership of their own learning. So when students are actively learning, they're doing all of these things. They're questioning, they're wondering, their curiosity is piqued, they're experimenting, they're thinking critically, they're making connections, they're clarifying ideas, and they're deepening their understanding. So this afternoon, I'd like to explore how Gemini Canvas can be involved to inspire active learning in the classroom. And I'm just going to pop over now into Gemini and share some examples with you. So Canvas in Gemini is one of the tools that we have available. Here we go, Canvas. And I'm firstly going to show you how we can use Gemini Canvas as a writing buddy so that students are interacting and actively involved with the writing process. So in this example, I'm going to ask Gemini to create a very bad example of a piece of writing that I can use with my students. And I want to be able to use that example on the screen at the front of the classroom so that we can have a look at it and so that we can make corrections together as a class and ask Gemini to help us a little bit. So I've put in my prompt and I've clicked Canvas. That's important that I click Canvas because what will happen when I press submit is that you will see that Gemini is actually going to open up literally a blank canvas on the right-hand side. Now, over here is where the text is, but it's different from a usual response. And that's because I can actually make changes directly onto this canvas. So for instance, I could say, well, I know this has a spelling mistake and a punctuation mistake, so I can actually make changes directly. This is great because I'm able to work with my students and together we can work out where the errors are and we can make changes directly into the canvas. Now, sometimes the students might say something like, well, this is all written in the first person using I, but when we're writing a formal piece of writing, we should be writing in the third person. So I could do something like I could highlight all of it, and you will see that this little Ask Gemini box comes up. So I could then say, write in the third person, with they, he, she, rather than writing I. So Gemini is now changing this right in front of my eyes. And there we go. You can see the blue highlights. Those are the words that have been changed from first person to third person. Now, there are still many mistakes, so this is a great opportunity for the students and the teacher to go through. Now, there might also be parts where you and the students decide there should be a little bit more information or something sort of should be changed. So, for instance, we could highlight just this last paragraph and say, make this conclusion more detailed, for instance. And then Gemini will just fix up that part of the little essay to make that bit, as you can see, a little bit better, a bit longer. I mean, there are still so many mistakes in here, but this is a very, very good opportunity for the students and the teacher to work on it together. Over on the right-hand side, you'll see that I am able to change the length. So I can click on this and I can make it much shorter or much longer. And that's an interesting thing to look at. What words have been changed? Which paragraphs have been lengthened now? And I can also change the tone. So I can make it more casual or more formal. You'll note that there are still lots of spelling mistakes, by the way, in this, because that's explicitly what I asked for in the prompt. So using this is a great way for students to really interact with a piece of writing, to look at, in this case, a bad piece of writing and see how they could make it better. Let's have a look at another example of how we might use Gemini Canvas. So I'm going to go to Canvas again. Now, the great thing about Canvas is that it actually codes whatever you'd like to code. So anytime you can think of something which is interactive, there's a great possibility that you'll be able to create that using vibe coding in Canvas. And vibe coding just means coding with natural language. So for instance, I might like to create a random number generator that I might like to use with my students. There's the prompt, very simple, and I've chosen Canvas. And now let's see what happens. You'll see that Gemini has opened up that blank canvas on the right-hand side, and you'll see it's hard at work doing some coding for me. So eventually it will come up with, here we go, the random number generator. Excellent. Let's try it out. So I have a minimum and a maximum that I can change. Let's just go to 10 and I can click generate and it will come up with a number. So that's working beautifully. Something I might like to use as a game or to call upon students or to use in maths for some particular way. That's a random number generator. Very quick and easy. So we're seeing teachers loving using this because they are able to very quickly and easily create little pieces of interactivity that they can use to help the class interact. So teachers really like calling on students, and sometimes random calling is fantastic. So using a random name spinner works wonders. I can click spin. Here are my students in the class. I can click spin. And when it lands on a student, in this case, John, I can ask John the question or ask John to perform a particular task. And I have set it up so that that particular student is removed once they have been chosen. Here's the prompt: generate a random name spinner which removes a name once chosen. Use the names. And there are the names of all the students in my class. Now, I love this because as a teacher, I'm creating something which is bespoke for my class, designed for my class and the colors they like or the theme they like, and of course their names. And it's safe because I'm not going to a site like randomnamespinner.com, which might have ads all over it. I'm creating one which is safe for me to use. In the same vein, teachers are doing things like creating a random group generator. So in this random group generator, the teacher puts in the list of names and then the number of groups can be generated. So here's my list of names. I'll just pop them in and I can choose how many groups I want and it will generate my groups for me. And I can keep using this throughout the lesson if I want the number of groups to be changed and so on. Again, something that I can create specifically for my class. So if I go over to the left and show you some of the iterative prompting that I did, I then said, look, Harry and Bob can never be in the same group because they just fight all the time. So I've actually asked Gemini to make sure that Harry and Bob are never placed in the same group. And so what happened then is that Gemini fixed it up. And now, as you can see here, it says Harry and Bob will never be in the same group. Let's test that out. Oh, we need to put in the names. Harry and Bob will never be in the same group. There are the names. And there we go. There's Bob and there's Harry. So they are definitely not in the same group. Now, that's fabulous. But of course, I don't want this on the screen so that Harry and Bob can see that they can't be in the same group. So over here on the left, I've had to prompt Gemini a little bit more. And I said, do not show the active constraints box. And then, of course, it created it again for me. And as you can see, the box has been removed. So this is lovely. I love this as a teacher. And it would be great now for me to have just this part on my big screen without the prompting on the left-hand side. So what I can do with this share button in the top right-hand corner is I can click share, and that then gives me the link, and that's just a URL. So I can now use that URL and put that on the big screen at the front of my room, and I can't see the prompts, I can only see the piece of interactivity. So using Gemini Canvas to come up with interactive elements that the teacher can use in the classroom is a real positive. Let's have a look now at how we can also use Gemini Canvas to check for understanding. So here I have asked Canvas to create an interactive quiz. So I've just said create an interactive quiz about the solar system for my grade 5 class. And I've said which curriculum it needs to be aligned to. In this case, aligned to the Australian curriculum. Now, of course, I can click add to add files, to add maybe my unit of work or specific lessons. But at the same time, I can keep it quite open and just point to a particular curriculum or a particular standard. I've chosen Canvas, importantly, and then I click submit. And then what happens is it should then create the quiz for me again in a new canvas on the right-hand side. And you'll see that I have a nice interactive multiple choice quiz that I can use with the whole class or with a group of students, or which the students could create themselves. It's a great revision tool. So I just need to go through and have a go. If I need a hint, I can click the Show Hint button. Oh, I'm really not sure about this one. Oh, Mars, excellent. And I can go through, and once I have finished, let's just get to the end. Once I've finished, I have my overall score, not very good. And I also have the option for my performance to be analysed. So this will tell me the highlights, the areas that I'm doing well in, and then the areas that I need to focus on, which is quite a lot in my case. And then I have the option of studying through some flashcards and also through a study guide, which will pinpoint the areas that I need to revise and help me to understand them. I can then check through my own understanding with the flashcards. Here's a flashcard. Excellent. And then I can move on to the next one when I'm certain with that. And that's a great study tool. So the interactive quiz, followed by the flashcards and the study guide, great way for a student to be active with their revision and to help them really deepen their understanding. In some cases, you might like to gamify this. So here's the same prompt that I used, the interactive quiz about the solar system, and it created it. But then I said, now can you turn this into a game show type of quiz? So this is now something that is a little bit more engaging for the whole class. It looks like a game show that they would find on TV. And again, I'm told if the answer is correct or incorrect and why it's incorrect if that's the case. But you'll also see I have the option of having hints up here or going 50-50 if I only have 2 that I need to choose from. So I like the idea that we can take something which is already interactive and engaging, that interactive quiz, and make it even more engaging by turning it into some sort of game show quiz. While I'm here, actually, I might just show you 2 little buttons. So in this little right-hand panel, you'll see, I can move it, I have the option to ask for Gemini features. If I click this, it's kind of like a lucky dip. It's Gemini saying, I'm going to suggest something really great that could add extra functionality to your little piece of interactivity. So let's see what it comes up with. Underneath that is this little arrow, and this is where I can choose part of my piece of interactivity and ask for it to make something a little bit better. Now, this is taking a little while to load. It's really thinking. I'm sure it's preparing something pretty amazing for me. Maybe let's come back and check in on it in a little bit while we move on to something else. One other great thing about Gemini Canvas is the ability, oh, here we go. What's it doing? So it's upgraded it and it's giving us mission control. So on every question, students can ask a follow-up question to mission control. And we have a bonus challenge. Excellent. So let's see what it looks like now. So mission control, where is mission control? Maybe with the hint. Oh, very nice. Okay, so that's looking really good. Let me show you this part, the select and ask. I can click on this part if I like, highlight something, and you'll see that this Ask Gemini comes up. And this is where I can say something like, change this to pink. And it will then change that particular button to a pink color. Or I could draw a box around something else, and I could ask it to change the font. So without me having to just use my natural language and say the 50-50 box, which is currently purple, make that pink, I can just draw a box around it and ask for that change to happen in real time. Now, one of the other wonderful things about a Gemini Canvas is the ability to create interactive simulations. So you'll see here, my prompt was to create an interactive simulation to show the size of the planets and their distance from the sun. I chose Canvas, and here it is on the right-hand side. And so it's created quite a nice little piece of interactivity for me. I can click on a planet, and then I'm told a little bit of information about it. So that's quite interesting. I can see the order of the planets. I can click on distance view, and this is quite interesting. It shows me the relative distance of each planet from one to the next. Quite interesting. So Mars is actually quite a long way away from Earth. And then look at this. The next planet along, Jupiter, is a long way from Mars. So that's very interesting for me to actually have a look at. What else can I show you? Many science teachers in particular are really enjoying this idea of creating interactive simulations, because just as I was doing here, it's making me really think. I'm drawing connections between what I already know about planets. I know Jupiter's big, but I didn't realize it was that far away from Mars. I wonder why that is. And I wonder, because these planets are closer to the sun, I wonder if that means that Mercury is warmer than Earth is. So because I'm playing around, I'm actually asking lots of questions and making connections to previous learning that I might have. So these simulations are particularly popular with science teachers. Let's have a look at this one. In this prompt, I asked Gemini to create a simulation to show the behavior of particles as the temperature changes. And have a look here. This is extremely interactive. What happens as I raise the temperature? Look at that. Why do you think that's happening? Is that related to anything else that you know? And you can imagine the inquiry and the questioning that might happen. This is bringing something that is quite abstract into something that makes a little bit more sense. And because we're physically able to play, change it to liquid. Why is that happening? Change it to solid. I'm developing a deeper understanding, and I'm hypothesizing, I'm experimenting, I'm making connections to previous learning, and probably my understanding is deepening. My memory of this is certainly deepening, because now whenever I see a liquid, I'll probably think of these particles. And when I see steam coming out of the kettle, I'll see particles in my head dancing. So it is bringing the abstract to the forefront and making it playful. Now, as I showed you before, I can click share and grab the link for this and maybe email it to my students or put it on Google Classroom, share it with them some other way so that they can have a go at it. If you don't yet see this share button here, you should probably see copy contents. So if you don't see that share option, you will see copy contents. And this is something else that you can do. When you copy the contents, what you're actually doing is copying all of that code. You're copying, in this case, all of that HTML code. And what you can then do is you could go into Google Sites. Here I am in Google Sites. Grab the embed button, and where you can embed the code is where you just paste in that HTML code that we saw. And there is my little simulation. And because I am in Google Sites, I can make this bigger. And then when I'm ready, I can publish this. And then I can have this available to my students. So that is it in Google Sites. So 2 different ways that you can share something that you have made in Gemini Canvas. Here's another example. This is a maths example. I love this because this is making that linear equation, y equals mx plus c, making it real and allowing students to really see it in their head because they're playing with it. So I can change the slope, m here, by moving this. And watch what happens. Look what's happening to that blue line. Look at what's happening to the current equation. And also, what is happening to the coordinate table down here? Is anything happening? Yes, it is. Why is that? What happens, do you think, when I change the y-intercept or the c? So what does c actually mean? That changes the y coordinate, as you can see. So again, it is making the abstract something that is a little bit more practical and obvious. I love that idea that AI, in particular Canvas in this instance, is allowing us to play with possibilities. So there are some other simulations that you can prompt Gemini to do. This was a Year 9 simulation. This is a little dashboard that changes when some decisions are made. So there's all this water that has been unallocated, and here are the 3 different options. If I click on this option, these are the trade-offs, but what will happen to my figures over here to the state of the basin? If I was to choose irrigation boost, these are the trade-offs, what would happen? So if I wanted to go with this, I could click confirm and execute, and you'll see that these figures down the left-hand side have been changed. So of course I can't play with the Murray-Darling Basin, neither can my students in real life, but it's interesting for us to see through this simulation what happens as the result of a particular decision. So considering that in terms of decision making and the impact on other things is really quite interesting. And then, of course, because it's all coded, you can do things like gamify some learning. So rather than a straight pencil and paper worksheet, we could create something which is a little bit more interactive that students could use to solidify their understanding or to engage a little bit more with something which is maybe not as interesting for them, like grammar. So in this one, it's gamifying working with pronouns. There's a little bit of information and I can listen to this to begin. And then it's just a case of clicking the correct answer and you see I'm getting this immediate feedback. And then here I'm actually typing in some pronouns and I get that instant feedback again. So just a nice way of gamifying or amping up some information, particularly for some of those topics that might be a little bit boring and dry for students. I saw a great example in Vietnam a couple of months ago, and this was bringing some textbook work alive, making something which was fairly dull in a textbook, bringing it alive and making it a little bit more interactive. So this was for grade 11, learning English. And again, you'll see how they're able to click on a card and then they have to put it into the right area. And once again, I'm getting that immediate feedback. A few different things here, lots of clicking just to see. It's kind of gamifying it a little bit. And then I like this. So this is the word bank, great for English language learners. The fact that you can click on this to hear the word being is also terrific for English language learners. And then a jumbled sentence. So I thought that was a really nice tool to use for language learners, just to make the activities that students do a little different. And then this wonderful example. So this is a speak flow coach. And in this example, the student pastes in their script and then they can actually begin practicing. So if a student needs to make a presentation in class, they can paste their script in here, start the practice, and then Gemini will record them and analyze their results. And then over here, we'll give them some information. Now, this is far less stressful than doing it in front of the class or even in front of the teacher as a practice and then getting some of that feedback. But it's okay doing it for AI. I tried it before and I got some great feedback about not enough eye contact or rushing or using too many ums. So it actually will list the areas that I'm doing well at and the areas that I need to work on. And then, of course, when Gemini Canvas first came out, because people knew that there was code involved, people immediately started coding games, vibe coding games. And students are still vibe coding their own type of games, zombie games, all sorts of games to apply their understanding of what they have been learning about in class. Now, because it just instantly can create a game, this was my prompt, create a Pac-Man game, because it can instantly play a game, which actually works. Deafened you because that's very, very loud. But because it is actually coded, students can go in, once they've finished vibe coding just with natural language, they can actually go in and they can make changes here. So isn't this great? A student could go, oh, actually, I want Pac-Man to be bright pink rather than yellow. So they could go into the code, work out where the color for Pac-Man is and change it and see if it's worked by going back to the preview and seeing it for real to see if it has made a difference or not, or changing the name of these buttons. So they're inquiring into the code and actually learning a bit about code without actually even realizing that they're doing that. Now, I'll just show you down here the little select and ask, which I made reference to before, but let's try it out. So I've clicked on this little bottom button, select and ask, and I might say something like, well, I'm going to draw a box around that, and I'll say change to Pac Girl. Now, I tried this earlier. I did the exact same thing, change to Pac Girl, and look, it's called it Pac Girl, but it was so clever. It also realized that it was going to change everything to hot pink too. So Pac-Man is now Pac Girl. How fun is that? So there are a few examples then of how Gemini Canvas can be used to inspire active learning. I just wanted to show a couple of other examples, not from Gemini Canvas, but a couple of other things that I've seen recently that teachers have been using Gemini for to help make learning for students a little bit more active. Now, we know and love Nano Banana, so that of course is the tool Create Image. And I'm seeing teachers use Nano Banana, Create Image, that's the tool there, to create worksheets. So rather than go onto sites like Twinkle or Teachers Pay Teachers or whatever, where they have to actually pay for some of this, or they try and trawl through the internet to find something which isn't quite right, teachers are able, just with a simple text prompt, to create the handout or the worksheet for students to use that is perfect for what they were covering in the lesson. This is a very simple example, but I think it's very, very impactful because we know how important it is for students to be active. And being active doesn't always mean doing that on a computer or on a phone. We know that paper and pen and pencil work well too. So being able to cater a handout directly to the student's needs, but keeping it interactive. So here are the blanks that they need to fill in. And being able to do this so quickly is what teachers are loving. Also, being able to differentiate. So maybe for some students, I would have a different type of handout, maybe a more complex image of a volcano, and maybe more blanks that need to be filled in. But that's the beauty of Nano Banana. I can prompt it and iteratively prompt it until I get exactly what I want. And then I saw this example the other day. A teacher in rural Victoria was saying that her students love to doodle and to colour in things. They really like doodle art, which I hadn't heard of. Anyway, so she created lots of doodle art handouts for them so that while they were listening to her speaking, while they were concentrating, while they were making sense of some information, they were actually colouring in as well. So I thought that was quite a nice little thing to do. You'll see here that these new buttons, by the way, these coloured buttons, allow you to draw around something, and you can then change that, ask to just change that with your natural language. So rather than saying for the explosive box, you just need to draw a box around it, draw a circle around it, and just say change to danger. Let's see if that works. Change to danger. That will then just change what I've asked it to change, the part that is in that blue little circle that I drew. So while that is happening, one final thing I want to show you this afternoon, and that's one of my favorite tools, that is being able to create storybooks in Gemini. So if you haven't created one of these before, I do encourage you to. Let's have a look at how we do that. I'll just go to a new chat, share this tab. Here we are. So in Gemini, if I go to Gems, it will bring up all the gems I have made, but it will also bring up some pre-made gems from Google. And it's this storybook one, which is just so beautiful. The storybook gem, once you give it a prompt, will actually create for you a story that is 10 pages long, that can be viewed at full screen, and that features characters which stay the same throughout. So the characters remain consistent. This is just such a good tool. It's fabulous for beginning readers. So you'll see in this particular story, I said create a storybook, which is a simple decodable story for beginning readers using these sounds, and these are the words that they know too. So it's created this beautiful storybook. I can actually also listen to it. So I can click on listen.
Pip sat on the mat.
And it will read.
Pip pat Sam. A pat on the mat.
There we go. I can download it too as a PDF if I want. And it's not just beginning readers who love stories. Everybody loves a story, really. So I have seen English teachers, for instance, use this to summarize a novel that is being read in class. And that's particularly great if the teacher wants the students to focus on something like symbolism, maybe. So in this case, in this book, the apple is a symbol that goes all the way through the book. So focusing on symbolism, focusing on setting through the images, or just simplifying the story so that all students are able to access it. Not just English too, I have seen stories in other languages. So here's a story set in Indonesia, written in Indonesian, and also can be read in Indonesian.
Saat istirahat, Budi tidak sengaja menyenggol mobil mainan milik temannya.
So in whichever country you are in, you'll be able to create a story that is read aloud and written in your particular language. And also great if you're teaching a different language, because there's no better way to learn another language than through stories, particularly when you can base the story on words or phrases that you have been studying with the students. I've seen great examples of math stories too, so it's not just constrained to English or to language or to beginning readers. Everybody likes a story, and every single subject area, I think, can make use of a story. So if we think about the question I posed before, hopefully you now have some ideas as to how you might be able to make use of Gemini Canvas to inspire active learning. So whether that is through writing, using Gemini Canvas as that writing buddy that I showed you at the beginning. So you and the students are working on a piece together, making changes, asking Gemini for suggestions to make something longer, shorter, formal, less formal. Or whether you're using Gemini Canvas to create classroom tools that you can use to inspire active learning in your classroom, to inspire discussion with random name spinners, or to inspire collaboration and group work with random group generators. Or whether you're using Gemini Canvas to create simulations and models so that you are bringing the abstract alive, so that students are thinking and wondering and investigating and playing, because that's how they learn. Or whether you are bringing the textbook alive, making a worksheet more interactive by making it interactive on the screen. Or whether you are indeed using a different tool within Gemini, like Nano Banana, to create interactive worksheets, fill in the blanks, colouring. Or whether you're using the beautiful storybook gem to create stories that will involve the students and that will allow them to bring learning to life in a different way, in a way of a story. So many ways that we can use not just Gemini Canvas, but Gemini to inspire active learning so that our students are making and testing, so that they're playing, thinking critically, clarifying their ideas, deepening their understanding, and being totally immersed in their learning. I do hope there are some ideas which have resonated with you today. If you have any questions, please do add them in the chat now. I think with Gemini Canvas, you are only limited by your imagination. There are so many possibilities. So enjoy playing. No questions? Well, thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you in a month's time.